So when solving for an absolute value equation, you always have to make sure the absolute value is by itself before you can set those two equations. So in this case, we do have the absolute value on the left side by itself. Even though that 4 is on the inside, that doesn't matter because it's what's contained in the absolute value. So we're going to make our two equations. We have x plus 4 is equal to 3, or we have x plus 4 is equal to negative 3. So we make one equation the exact same, and then we make the other one set equal to a negative value. So we're going to solve for x. So we subtract 4 on both sides. So we get x is equal to negative 1. Or we're going to subtract 4 on this side, and it's going to be x is equal to negative 7. So your final answer would be x is equal to negative 1 or x is equal to negative 7. Now in the second equation, the second example, we have 3 times the absolute value of 13 minus 2x is equal to 5. That 3 is going to be in our way, so we got to get rid of that first before we can make our two equations. So because this is 3 times the absolute value, I'm going to make sure I divide by 3. So I have the absolute value of 13 minus 2x is equal to 5, because 15 divided by 3 is 5. Now, if you notice, my absolute value is by itself on the left-hand side, even though those numbers in between, if the absolute value is by itself. So I can make my two equations. So I have 13 minus 2x is equal to a positive 5, or 13 minus 2x is equal to a negative 5. I'm going to solve for x, so I'm going to subtract 13 on both sides. So I'm going to get negative 2x is equal to a negative 8. I'm going to divide by negative 2 on both sides, so I get x is equal to a positive 4, or I'm going to subtract 13 on both sides. So I have negative 2x is equal to a negative 18. I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides, negative 2 on both sides. So I get x is equal to a negative or a positive 9 because it's a negative divided by a negative. So my final answer would be x is equal to 4 or x is equal to 9. Now for that third example, we have two things in the way of getting that absolute value by itself. So I have 3 times the absolute value of 4x plus 2 minus 7 equals 11. Now the same with multi-step equations, you always kind of want to get rid of the addition or subtraction first. So in this case, we want to add 7 on both sides. So you always get rid of that addition or subtraction first. So I have 3 times the absolute value of 4x plus 2 is equal to 11 plus 7, which is going to give me 18. Now to get that by itself, I'm going to divide by 3 because it's 3 times the absolute value. So divide by 3 on both sides. So I get the absolute value of 4x plus 2 is equal to 18 divided by 3 is 6. Now I notice the absolute value is by itself on the left-hand side, so I can make my two equations. So I have 4x plus 2 is equal to 6, or 4x plus 2 is equal to a negative 6. I subtract 2 on both sides, so I get 4x is equal to 4. I divide by 4, and I get x is equal to 1. Or I subtract 2 on both sides. I get 4x is equal to negative 8, because negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8. Divide by 4 on both sides. So I get x is equal to negative 2. So that would be my final answer then. Okay, my last example, this is a special case. So you always need to get the absolute value by itself. So in this case, it's the absolute value of 3x plus 5 plus 6 is equal to negative 2. So we got to get rid of that plus 6 because we want to get that absolute value by itself. So if I subtract by 6 on both sides, I get the absolute value of 3x plus 5 is equal to a negative 8. Now, because this is a special case, if you notice that this is ever a negative value, so I'm going to kind of like circle that, and this number on the right side, when you have your absolute value by itself, this number can't ever be negative. So I'm going to put can't be a negative number. So anytime that it is a negative value, before you make your two equations. So I know some of you are going to ask, well, this one is a negative number, like your second equation. It's before you make your two absolute value. Because if you think about it, any number that you plug in here, it's always going to be a positive number, because absolute value, you always get a positive answer. So before you make your two equations, this number cannot be a negative number. So what would happen is that this would be a no solution for the answer. So it is not possible for this to be a negative number before you make your two equations.